Hey, what's up, everybody? It's BDF44 coming into another video. So, I'm kind of curious about something, and it's one of those situations where I honestly don't know. Like, I really do not know. Um, so for long as I've been alive, I've always seen stories, like stories of people who, something terrible, tragic happened to them and they pass away or murdered. More so, something violent happened to them, and the story will be zeroed in on in such a way as if they were like a celebrity, um, you know what I'm saying, or as if they were, someone who were known before this took place. Now, granted, in certain situations, like unfortunately, when it's racially motivated, talk about George Floyd, stuff like that, I don't have questions about why those things were big stories. Now they were motivated. Did people leech upon those stories in some cases to move their own agendas and stuff like that? Of course, that stuff happens a lot in any kind of situation that garners attention. But for me, I'm just very curious about why certain stories of sadness and murder or whatever are focused on more so than others. And I think it's probably um, something that'll make me feel much better in not saying specifics and stuff like that, because this is really something that could be listened to at any given time. This isn't about today more so, because you know we can apply this to any year basically. It's just one every year where the media will zero in on that specific story, and they will give us updates as if that person were a celebrity. And I'm curious about that. Why them, why now, or why not someone else? You know what I mean? Like, you hear about these stories and stuff. If you follow the news, you're gonna hear about that stuff all day long. But some stories just gain national coverage, and I'm trying to figure out what's the criteria for that, outside of racially motivated or, you know, uh, what's the word when your group was attacked? That's what I'm trying to say. If it's not a group that was attacked as it pertains to like the LBGT community, like someone from their representatives, because obviously that's going to gather attention because a community is going to be behind them, or African American because a community is going to be behind them. They're going to shine a light on something like that. But I don't really understand. Like the media takes sometimes they choose stories. Like they will choose a story, and I know it's a lot of conversations going around about, you know, I've heard uh, people saying things like, and I don't want to use the wrong term, but when a Caucasian woman passes away, they will kind of shine a light on that and kind of make it so that it's a bigger story than, say, maybe a Hispanic woman passing away or something like that. You know what I mean? It's just not. It's the question for me is what makes that particular story the national coverage story, so that we need updates every 4 hours on how this person's situation is going, and they follow the trial and they tell us what happened. And it's like, you've made us care. And it's not that we didn't, because she's a person who lost her life, but so did that person over there. We heard about that one, fleeting, and they never said nothing again. So did that one over there. That was even more horrible. That was even more horrific, with more innocents involved. But nevertheless, we kind of just look past that as nothing. But this particular story with that particular person, I'm trying to figure out, was this particular person, where I'm coming from is this person related to somebody who has that type of sway? You know what I mean? Is it because it's like, you look back in certain stories in the past, like that person they talk about for hours and hours every day, and they were just a random somebody like me on the street, and something terrible happened to him, and the story just caught, I guess. So maybe the story just catches. I don't know. It's something that I see a lot. You know what I mean? In my lifetime, I've been on this earth for 37 years, so I've seen this a lot. And it's just like, why this story as opposed to maybe another story? Why not shine a light on that person over there? Someone random over there may have passed away in a horrible way, and they had like 8 kids. Like, do we care about them? We don't hear nothing about them. But then this particular person on this particular place did this particular thing, and something horrible happened, and now we got all 50 states pouring all of their news into the situation. And it makes a person think, like, is it racially motivated? Is it because this person may be of the majority, maybe white. Is that what it is? Is there something called white woman syndrome that we really do need to start looking into, to where they will focus in on specific stories as it pertains to tragic situations happening to white citizens? I want to know. You know, as a black person, I was raised in a household where conversations would be had. We'd be like, mom would tell me stuff like, see how they doing? Like, this is how they do, you know, and what she would be referring to is the importance that is placed on lives that aren't necessarily of color or necessarily of marginalized groups. And the emphasis that they'll place on the innocence of the person, or the emphasis that they'll place on the character of the person when they were of a certain hue, versus, like, say it's somebody who's African American, maybe they're from somewhere else, had the same criteria of life, the same tragic accident, the same circumstances of environment to a degree, in terms of family that love them and people willing to speak up about how sad they feel, whatever it would be, to make it comparable to the other story, and yet you just won't see any comparison in attention. So I'm just fleeting in thought, just trying to wrap my head around how to form a good and thorough opinion about what it is that I'm perceiving to be just picking and choosing and blowing things up out of proportion, so to speak, in terms of the intention that would be garnered for a specific story that isn't about race, that isn't about someone being a celebrity, that isn't about necessarily, you know, just trying to give information on how to save someone's life or something like that. They're just trying to tell a sad story a lot of the times, and just get us riled up about whatever the person may be, get us in our feelings about, you know, really a stranger who was murdered when like 30 strangers were murdered today. It's a sad thing, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not sitting here saying that person doesn't deserve all the attention in the world. I would more so say that it's impossible to give everybody that attention. So why choose this person or that person or this person? Just curious to know. And I was raised also to pay attention to, you know, the type of stuff that we're given to, in terms of like, what do we subject ourselves to? What type of seeds are being planted in our minds? What is it that they're trying to paint in regards to how we should think, how we should feel, how we should vote, etc. And so a lot of those conversations were had in my household, and so it kind of helped formulate some opinions that are maybe fueling this conversation as well. But I'm trying to sort through all of that as I grow, especially as my channel grows. I know I'm gonna be speaking to a lot of people, so better to sort through some of these things now and get some understanding on things that I'm just not sure about, you know, as it pertains to how to view things from my perspective. You know, a lot of times people are afraid to have these conversations because by the time they get these voices, they're already signed to contracts that don't allow them to say certain things. I'm not yet in that space, so I can kind of, you know, spew whatever it is today, and then later on, if it needs to change in regards to how I feel, I'll grow and I'll come to you with whatever I feel. But that's kind of how I go, you know. It's easy to look in the past. That's another thing. It's easy to look at the John Gruden situation when they're going back into old emails. It's easy to look in the past and find something you don't like about somebody, or to find something that would paint them a certain way so that you can tell a story about them. And to be honest with you, I think they could do that to anyone. The question is, why do they choose to? I guess if you want to tie it back into what we were initially talking about, why would they choose to paint a picture about a certain person as if they were blessed innocence, and then something horrible happened to them, and then take someone who had that exact same thing happen to them, maybe from a different group or a different race, and then, you know, pull out all of the stuff that would ultimately paint them in a more negative light. You know, see that a couple of times, and you start to wonder if that's just how the world is supposed to work as it pertains to certain groups and certain people. And as long as, you know, that is the case, we just have to swallow that and deal with it. You know, and look, as a person who's African American, I pay attention to a lot of conversations that come from people who don't think like me, who may not understand people who look like me, or believe that they can come to some type of understanding when there isn't really one, because every human being is different. But nevertheless, I try to come to terms with what are the opinions that I hear and some of the things that are being said. And a lot of times it just seems like to me that a lot of people who are not of color don't look at people of color as if they're supposed to feel as deeply about certain things as we do. And and from maybe from a person's perspective who isn't of this mindset where things do feel as deeply, maybe they look and say, well, I'm not as sensitive. You know, if you say something offensive to me, I'm offended, but it's not like someone needs to go outside and pick it for me. You know, but I think it's most important to try to understand where a person's coming from a long-term perspective. What household did you come from? What grandparents were talking about? What space of the world did you come from, and how does that mold where you tend to, what you feel and how you say it. So as I continue to listen to people who don't think like me and try to listen to them, what I gather is a certain flippantness for the sensitivity levels of different people from marginalized groups, or the very, very different points of view as it pertains to not understanding why we would come up with these concepts of, white woman syndrome and things of that nature, why we would even take our brains there. But we're coming from a place where the households that we've been in, and the grandparents and our parents and the great grandparents, even if you look at me and you say I should not have certain views as it pertains to race or whatever, you'd have to understand that certain things that were being said to me as a child helped me mold who I am. Certain things that my grandmother said to my mom helped mold who she became as a mother to raise me. Do you see what I'm saying? So I can only assume that a lot of people who have certain views that conflict with mine kind of come from that same place. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are taking their opinions and allowing it to formulate how they feel about blanketed individuals. But when it comes to certain things that they can't think through, they will place those images and those, not images, but those formulas that were given to them by their parents, and they will apply it to different things that they can't figure out on their own to help identify what it is that they're looking at. And so as I grow through all of that and I try to learn as much as I can, I then come back to, well, a lot of people are mad on the other side, based on the opinions I've been paying attention to, that African Americans would bring certain complaints to the table, that we would even point the fact that African American women aren't being shined a light on in certain situations, unless it's a civil rights situation that can be monetized in some weird way. Black Lives Matter, something like that. That's the only time you want to talk about specific situations where African American women are being taken advantage of. I read somewhere that they found out information today on one of the old murders that took place. An African American kid was found in a river or something like that. College kid, all his organs missing. His jaw was removed by way of saw. Like, this is real horrible stuff, and we barely hear anything about it. I think his name was Jelani Day. I hope I'm not wrong, but I believe that's what it was. And it's like that story's not getting this information. That story's not getting that attention, rather. We're not hearing about that. Or when you hear about a certain kid passing away who's African American, he gets shot, say doing something, now they bringing out pictures of him holding a gun. They're bringing out pictures of him looking like he's, doing something that would otherwise make it so that some would look at him as a menace. Now, people who are from his neighborhood know he's not a menace. He's just a product of the people around him who dress like him, who look like him, who act like him, who think like him. And maybe he's from a world where things are naturally just more raw in his neighborhood than maybe some of the people who are looking at him and saying, whoa, I can't be around this dude. But at the end of the day, he's still a person with his norms, and his life was cut down, and we should be sending some intention his way, no different than we would send some attention someone else's way. So, and so on and so forth. So that's where my head is just spinning around, just trying to figure out how to really just wrap my mind around certain things. It's things I've always tried to wrap my mind around, really, but as I grow older, it seems more important to come to you with these things. That's a lot of times people are afraid to, as I said, and I'm not afraid to. I know that things can be interpreted a certain way, that words are important, that sometimes I'm a little more flippant with words than I'd like to be. The older I become, the more I understand the importance and power of being precise with your words. Sometimes I fail at that, and it is what it is. But, as I grow older, I think you guys will learn that my intention is to always be mindful of not only my perspective, but others, protecting of what matters to me, but also open to new ideas. But most importantly, just not making myself the center of attention as it pertains to certain complaints. whatever happens in my life or how things go, I don't want to be remembered for complaining or saying that things were just not good enough for me, and then that's not what I'm about. But if anything, uh, I would like to see in my lifetime a bit more clarity as it pertains to why these particular stories are perceived, not perceived, that's not the way to say it. These particular stories are given as much attention as they are. The stories that I said, why people are treated the way they are, why uh, people will change narratives in regards to different types of victims, etc. It's just, I think the answer kind of always boils down for a person like myself to racism. And I'm just ready to see something different in conclusion. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? If it always just boils down to basic and ridiculous racism, then a lot of what people are saying in regards to what they feel isn't as intricate and as advanced in thought as it should be. And I'd like to think people in general are thinking a little better than just, I hate him because of his skin, or I hate him because he, it has to be deeper than that. And I'm trying to figure out what it is. That's what it is. Because if it's still just about basic stupidity and science not mattering in terms of clearly skin doesn't define a person or anything, if we can't seem to make that be something that we have on the forefronts of our mind going forward, it's going to be very difficult, for us to continue in the right direction and moving this thing in the way that we have been. I just don't think we can continue on that path and get where we want to go as a country, as a world, man, as a world. And that's another thing, before I go, and I love my country. I love where I'm at. I'm from Los Angeles, born and raised. Los Angeles is in USA. I'm an American person. I love myself. But I'm not a nationalist, bro. Not as it pertains to valuing someone's life over mine, or valuing my life over someone else's, as it pertains to where they are and versus where I am. I just don't believe in that. Growing up in Los Angeles, it didn't allow me to believe in that. I have too many people that I love that are of different races and backgrounds and countries and different statuses, and it's just like, come on, man. At the end of the day, I have been exposed to too much in different cultures and different races to have any sort of real ignorance as it pertains to us not being able to get along. Now, are we going to have differences in culture? Are we going to have some jokes that are probably not funny? Are we going to have some ignorant ways based on some grandparents and great-grandparents stuff? Yes, those things are unfortunately things that we're going to have to take time to untangle. That's why I turned on the camera, to help untangle some of this. And if each and every human being doesn't look inside of themselves and do that, then of course some of those views are going to carry forward. That's kind of what I was alluding to in the second minute of this video. So all in all, I'm just rambling. I do hope that I've made some sense to you guys. It's how my brain works. But I would hope at the end of this conversation that you guys would understand that racism sucks in my eyes, man. However it's placed. Putting value over a person versus another person based on their race or based on where they come from, a more innocent place, a more safe place, a more high class place versus someone who's grew up in a lower class place or in the slums or in the hood. I think that's a fallacy of promotion. You don't promote life that way if you're trying to accurately depict good and evil, right and wrong, what would be otherwise acceptable and not. I don't think that you can effectively identify and teach others what to look for in those categories and in those things by telling them to pay attention to race. I'm living proof in growing up here that's a bad way of trying to identify who's who. My name is BDO44. Thank y'all for watching. I'm out.